Welcome to another edition of Change Talks, interviews that spread ideas. Today I'm talking to Alan Whitton. Now Alan has a hypnotherapy practice, but he also has a method for working with fighters called Fighter's Mind. Having been a martial artist for over 20 years, this is a natural step for Alan, and in this interview we go into what specifically Fighter's Mind is, and what changes he makes when working with sports people compared to normal members of the public. This is a great interview for therapists and coaches who work with sports people and how to use hypnosis effectively to enhance peak performance. I hope you enjoy this interview and learn a lot from Alan. What I have is that you've created this thing called Fighter's Mind, where you work with fighters. I was just wondering how you came to devise this.
Okay, so, well, really, I mean, obviously, I've been involved in martial arts of some description or the other for, shockingly, sort of about 20, 25 years or something now. What happened was when I started to get into NLP, when I started to get into hypnosis and change work and all those other things, it just struck me, my God, there's nothing like this for the fighters, for the martial artists, for the competitors, and in something which so clearly is about state of mind. Yeah. I mean, if you look at Zen warriors and all the rest of it, it's all about state of mind. And I just felt that, this is something which is massively lacking from, if I'm honest, and this is all my opinion, of course, sort of modern, the practices of modern day martial artists, and specifically people who are putting their asses on the line, competitors and fighters, from contact fighters.
So was it something that you tried on yourself, like what did certain ways of being for yourself, or did you just get some people that were up for it and you tried it on them?
It was really a bit of both. I mean, what I did was I kind of looked back at my own competitive and also fight career, and I realised that actually I'd sort of performed my best when I'd sort of accidentally done visualising, or I'd accidentally tied in some sort of mental or thought process either before the event or generally before the event, and that was when I got the best results. So it was a case of that. It was a case of all the guys that I was training with knew roughly the kind of things that I was doing, and I said, look, can I borrow you? So it was very much field tested. So I've done a ton of pro bono work in order to sort of develop what works and what doesn't. And I'll be honest, I'm not. I am pompous, but I'm not pompous enough to think that my work is finished and that I have a complete system. Because I think when you start thinking in those terms, that's when inflexibility, starts to solidify, and that's not. Fighter's Mind is all about flexibility. If there's one thing it's all about flexibility. So it's very much an ongoing process, and some of the nice little elegant aspects are things that I've actually incorporated based on things that fighters have already done. And right. I've seen that, and the NLPs will say I've modelled the strategy. I just nicked it. Do you mind if I have that? Yes, thank you.
Stolen it.
I mean, a very brief example. A guy who's a current cage fighting, domestic cage fighting champion. When we would do something where we were going downstairs, like a traditional going down the stairs hypnosis thing. What he would be doing is every step that he would step down on, he would be stepping on a resource. So one might be a step of strength. So as he would step down, he would step on the word strength, and he would feel strength. And I was blown away when he told me this, I thought, why didn't I think of that? Yeah. But like, you don't mind if I nick that? So I've had lots of nuances and little additions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which I've gathered from the field in and of itself.
Okay. And when you were first doing it, did you encounter much resistance? Because I know in kind of the fight game there tends to be a big focus on condition, especially now when everyone kind of knows the same techniques, but still not much focus on kind of like the mind aspect of it.
It's very interesting. One of the reasons why I love martial arts and specifically fighters is that they've got this amazing bullshit radar. They can, I don't know how it's developed, but they can smell bullshit a mile off. And so that's where, and this links into something that we might talk about later. That's where I found that my existing, my previous experience of actually being a fighter myself has given me, has granted me that foot in the door. Whereas other, when I spoke to a fight gym, when I was thinking, they were considering my services, they said, "Oh, I know about NLP. I don't want any geek in a little lab coat." So that was interesting. How they obviously, some sort of what they would call like, you actually did say, a specky twat. But he is, like a bit of a boffin, mad scientist character, which I thought was probably a damning indictment of how NLP is perceived, certainly amongst that group of people. So
most definitely.
That has helped me. Have I received resistance? Yeah, I think I've traded initially on my previous experience, and people have been resistant to what I was about to do with them. And once they have an experience, number one, have an experience, and number two, more importantly, get a result, that's when they're like, okay, I'm in. So, and again, the fighters with their bullshit radars and their bullshit detectors, they're very much, when you're in the circle of trust, you are so in the circle of trust. I've had two champions sort of say to me, "I trust you 110%. Where of course in my mind, my internal dialogue is, well, technically, 100% is the most. But I don't say that to them because they're big, scary bruisers. So
yeah. And are you in their corner now as well when they fight as well?
No, I don't fight in the corner because that's not my job. My job is to do the mind work ahead of time. I mean, I've worked in changing rooms, and I'm happy to work in changing rooms. But I don't. I mean, I can work. I've worked in corners as a cornerman, during my sort of Thai boxing career and stuff like that, But it's not something I've done. From my perspective, the work's already done by that point.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're actually working with a client, how does the session look, and is it structured differently to when you're working with the other clients? Because you also have a hypnotherapy practice as well, don't you?
Yeah. It's not quite the same. Some of the opening frames are similar. What do you want? Getting specific about outcomes, that kind of thing. Which is very generic in coaching in lots of in lots of things like that. It's a lot more high energy, and I guess there's quite often there's a bit more movement because I'm speaking with athletes and I often want to map across an internal visualization with some degree of movement, so I'm connecting up micro muscle movements to internal representations.
Okay.
So does it look the same? I hypnotise athletes nearly every time I see them, or we'll do some sort of a guided visualization, which I usually then ambush, or rather not ambush, hijack and hypnosis, because it creates a greater flow, not because for any other reason other than it creates better continuity within the framework of the session.
Yeah.
So that there's stand-up exercises, there's eyes closed exercises. That I do use lots of those practices within my hypnotherapy business as well.
Right.
Because I don't like people just to be sitting on their arse all the time. I like them to be doing stuff. And so, but generally there is more movement.
Okay, and like when you're seeing these clients, is it normally in the actual training place? Because I remember watching in The Ultimate Fighter with Georges St. Pierre, and with his with his trainees, he would get them to visualize them in the middle of the ring whilst they're in the middle of the cage and holding their hands up in victory, to do that kind of visualization.
Yeah, I do a lot of that. I mean, one of the places that I work at is at Titan, with a fighter over at the Titan gym, which is one of the premier MMA gyms in the country. Sort of Brad Pickett's comes from there, and there, you know, I'll go in there and I'll do very similar things with the fighters there. So yes, it's probably about 50-50 if I'm honest. What I found is, I mean, I'm more than happy to hypnotise any of these athletes anywhere. However, you know, noise is a consideration. You know, I mean, I'm used to sort of like incorporating distractions into the piece of hypnosis or the piece of change work that I'm doing. But you know, clearly, if you've got a quiet room where you're not going to be disturbed, that is going to be optimal. So sometimes I will do that, and sometimes I'll work in the actual gym itself. Probably, yeah, like I said, about 50-50. For the simple reason that I want the people to have positive associations with where they're training as well.
Yes.
Where they're training is half of it as well, and also quite often what I'll do is I won't just do mental rehearsal. I'll do physical rehearsal of some of the more ritualistic elements of preparing for the fight. So I'll actually use the space as a representation, if you like, as a metaphor for the actual fight night itself.
Okay.
So, in short.
And it's handy. You can have a training session afterwards.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, quite often I'll bring a pair of shorts and kick the bag for 5 minutes and realise, bloody hell, my shins aren't as conditioned as what they used to be. Make my excuses and jog on.
And go. Okay, and when you're working with sports people in general, what are normally the common things that show up that they need help with, or they need more conditioning mind-wise with?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that falls into it probably falls into a couple of categories. I mean, some of the fighters that I work with, you know, if they've really had a good drubbing, if they don't have a real pasting in one of their previous fights, then that's, you know, obviously remedial work. So that's a confidence thing.
Yeah.
So that's some of the time it's nerves, and which again is more confidence and more rehearsal and stuff involved. But I would say probably that's only about the remedial stuff is only usually about 30% of the time. About the rest of the time is probably spent working generatively, so working towards I guess a solution, but an outcome. So everything focused towards, you know, the fighter getting exactly what it is that they want, namely, you know, knocking the other person out, or stopping the person, or getting a win of some description. Yeah. So, but you know, really, what I would mention also is that I haven't just worked, and I don't just work with competitive fighters. Some of the martial artists I work with, they just want to get better for their own benefit, and sometimes there are mental blocks, you know, there for varying reasons. That they just want to do better within the scope of their own development, you know, in their own gym, you know, for their gym wars or whatever. So,
okay.
So that's something that I do and have done in the past as well.
So is there normally a lot of pre-fight nerves work and they need help with and things?
You know, usually because of the way that I work, I don't usually encounter any of that stuff, because I usually catch it before it happens.
Right.
And I turn those pre-fight, because and one of the things, every fighter is different. Some people fight best when they're relaxed. Some people fight best when they're in a high energy state. So I'll assess that on a person per person basis, and tailor my work accordingly. So some people, you know, it's appropriate to have some level of not nerves but high energy, or you know, in an excitatory state, or you know, a state of high focus. So